What's going on, people? I see we have Tech for Your Needs and Dave in the chat, along with a few other people who I'm not sure who they are because I don't see them logged in, but welcome to the weekly live stream we do every Monday here, 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on the Go Cell Phone Repair channel. Today we're going to be talking about some interesting tech stuff, and hopefully my audio is working correctly today. You guys let me know if anything sounds off. But some of the topics I wanted to go over, one is a revisit to the Google Duplex demo. There is an article kind of inquiring as to whether there might have been, not 100% real and genuine as far as how they executed that demo. We'll talk about that, and also whether or not the Google Duplex system would violate two-party consent laws. That's the one where if you call someone on the phone and you're recording the telephone call, you have to let them know, depending on what state you are originating the call from. Well, in California, which is where Google is based, and we assume the call came from here, that's something that you have to tell people about. So does that apply to an artificial intelligence? Man, lots of those kinds of questions will be coming through in the near future. The OnePlus 6, faster in real-life tests than the iPhone X and the Galaxy S9. Chinese notched Nokia X6 sells out 700,000 units in 10 seconds. That's a lot of phones, but then again, there are a lot of people in China. Finally, Android 8.0 Oreo is officially rolling out to the US, unlocked Moto Z. The red hydrogen one, which we did kind of briefly talk about last Thursday, has a power button on, has a fingerprint scanner on the power button. You guys gotta vouch for me here. I was talking about this months ago, like the one place that would make sense to put a fingerprint scanner, put it on the power button. You're gonna use the lock button anyways. I mean, it just makes sense. Cell phones thrown in the trash are exploding in garbage trucks and dumps. That's pretty messed up. Hopefully not too many more in airplanes. And there's an iPhone dumbbell case. I don't know why, but I thought you might be interested in seeing what that looks like. So let's get into it right after this. Where's my stinger? It's gone. Oh well. Let's see. Is Dave a bot? I don't think so, because I've been talking to Dave for quite a while. How's it going, Johnny Chang? Good to see you as well. I believe Dave is not a bot. If he was, he would be a very good one, because he's actually put in a few typographical errors here and there. So now I see what you're getting at. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. No, I don't think there would be any bots on this channel. But if you think a little further down into the future, man, there's some crazy things. In fact, I just had a conversation with someone who had a friend that was banned from Twitch because he was selling some sort of script or plugin or I don't know how you would describe it. But in order to monetize your channel on Twitch, you have to have a certain number of viewers and a certain number of subscribers. And this guy was selling software that would allow people to make it look like they were getting a bunch of views. So you can only imagine we're going to see more of that in the future. Before I forget it, folks, if you enjoy these live streams, do me a favor, hit that like button down there, wherever it is. It's probably over there somewhere. That will help me out tremendously. And before we jump into the news articles, there was something that I wanted to talk about quickly that is, relevant to everyone in the tech industry, people who are doing phone repairs. This just came up recently, and in fact, I had a conversation about this as well, and that is an audio problem with the iPhone 7 and 7 Plus that is caused by iOS 11. So we have been doing work on audio ICs, which are causing things like screen lag. You get some of the features that rely on audio capability being grayed out from the menus, and that's one set of problems that is pertains to the hardware. So there's actually a problem underneath the audio IC chip. But on the other hand, we have a problem with the audio on the iPhone 7 after people upgrade to iOS 11. So we don't want to confuse those two things and start taking phones apart and removing things and replacing them when you don't really need to. So I would encourage you to investigate what the symptoms of an audio IC problem are, as opposed to some of the symptoms that people are seeing when they upgrade their phone. And obviously, if they recently did an upgrade and suddenly the audio stopped working, that's probably the reason why. It's more than likely a software problem, not a hardware issue. And, a couple things that we don't like to do. One of them is to create problems where they don't exist. So if the problem is in the software, the last thing you want to do is start removing components from the board and putting them back on. And secondly, I am always hesitant to upgrade a customer's phone after a repair. You know, if you start running into things after you fix something and you think, oh, well, maybe if I restore the phone or I upgrade it to the latest iOS, that's going to fix the problem. Well, in many cases, if that operating system is brand new, it's just been released into the wild and we don't know what to expect from it, you might cause some other problems to surface that weren't there before you worked on the phone. And then, of course, you have to immediately assume that you caused those problems when, in fact, it wasn't you. So, you know, the larger number of factors that go into this equation, it's like, okay, now we don't really know where the problem is coming from. So I generally discourage people from doing that, you know, unless there doesn't seem to be any other alternative and you've talked to the customer and they're okay with taking that chance, because sometimes doing an upgrade or a restore is not always going to be in your best interest. Something good to know about. Hey, what's going on? Greg M., John Cassidy, Harvey, good to see you. Let's see. Where do we go? I am dyslexic. That's funny. I think iOS 11, excuse me. Guys, bear with me. I'm getting over a cold that I had this weekend. It's almost completely gone, but if it starts getting like out of hand, I'm going to do one of then you don't have to see or hear me coughing or, you know, blowing my nose or anything else silly like that. It's almost gone. It's almost out of my system. Where were we? iOS 10 is the most stable build. I think iOS 11 has to be the buggiest iOS version Apple has ever released, and I think everyone is in agreement on that. And in fact, they're expecting iOS 12 to pretty much fix a lot of the problems that were caused by iOS 11. So if you like to be cutting edge and download the beta and try it out first, more power to you, but you know that does come with some risks, and I get a lot of people that say they can't wait. And we remember the Apple server used to practically crash. You know, you'd go to download an update and you couldn't get it because there were so many people downloading it at once. If that's your thing, you know, have fun, but just understand that in many cases there are some bugs that can't be worked out at the factory. They can't test every single phone under every single circumstance you can think of with every combination of apps installed on the phone, you know, and any other variables that could be in there. So you do take a risk, and in some cases you end up with a bricked phone or something that has to wait for another update to fix the problem that was caused by jumping on that early bandwagon. So, you know, the caveat to the people that are doing that, let's see, where were we? I think Miss Tessa, you mean Jessa Jones, already experimented about the DSP chip responsible for the audio on the iPhone 7 in one live stream. Well, she did point out some known or some issues that were discovered under the audio IC chip right along what she calls the fault line, which makes a lot of sense because it's kind of towards the center of the phone where we see a lot of pressure. You know, even if you don't see your phone physically bent, if you carry it around in your pocket front or back, especially if you're sitting down under those situations, you know, you're putting stress on the outer part of the housing, even if it's minimal. And because Apple screws every single part of this board, top, bottom, and middle, down into the frame, any pressure that you put on the outer part of the phone is transferred in, you know, directly to the PCB. And if there's anything on that surface that can be damaged, it often will. And what she and a few other people kind of discovered is that there are areas right beside the SIM tray, right beside the NAND, where you put pressure on there and you start pulling pads out from underneath those audio chips. And, you know, it's the same thing that we saw with touch disease for the most part on the iPhone 6 Plus, where you put some pressure on there and it lifts those pads up, and at that point you've got to do some hardware repair. But I wanted to make sure that everyone understands that you don't want to assume that that's the problem. You know, before you start going in there and investing the time and the risk that's involved in removing that chip and replacing it, you want to make sure that that is where the problem's coming from. So, you know, if it doesn't match the symptoms that she's listed, and off the top of my head, I want to say that it's the laggy touch screen that we see. There's voice memos are grayed out, and there's a couple other things that tend to go wrong. And if you see those, you can kind of assume that there's a good probability that that's where the problem came from. But, you know, if you don't see any of those, and if it's something like the volume controls are grayed out and someone just upgraded the software on their phone, you could be looking at something with a completely different cause. So I just caution people not to jump right into that and assume that that's the problem. You cannot backport iOS 10 to the iPhone 8 or 10. You mean like downgrade? Is that what you're saying? I assume. You cannot backport? I'm assuming that's what you mean there. Yeah, it's pretty rare. You know, once Apple decides they're not signing any particular version of iOS for whatever model that is, you're out of luck if you've already upgraded. That's the one thing that's kind of limiting, you know, when it comes to iPhone, and partly due because they like to maintain tight control over their products. So I do want to talk here quickly. Let's make sure I have the right tab. You know, last Thursday we were talking about or might have even been last Monday, we were talking about the Google Duplex demo where they called up a restaurant and a hair salon and a couple other businesses. They might have all fallen into those categories, and demonstrated how this artificial intelligence at the Google I/O could basically convince people that they were talking to a real person, you know, going as far as inserting mistakes that are in the human language. You know, by nature, we'll say things like, you know, those kind of filler words as our brains are kind of processing and figuring out what it is that we're going to say next. And they always tell you one of the attributes of a good speaker is you don't hear them doing the ums and the ahs because they know exactly what they're going to say. And I'm certainly not claiming to fall into that category. I have made a conscious effort not to do that, but it's hard, you know, especially when you're just having a conversation and your brain is still trying to access information. Well, they built those into this artificial intelligence so that it really sounds like a person, and they've used that in order for this thing, supposedly, you know, according to Google, to access its neural network and get the information it needs for the correct response to whatever information it was given from the person it's having the conversation to. And if there's a stall, it'll insert and ah, just like a person would for the most part. Well, they're questioning whether or not this actually happened, and the reason why is that a publication called Axios News, they figured out the restaurant, or at least one of the restaurants that was used in this test, and it is believed to be Hong's Gourmet in Saratoga, California. An employee at the restaurant said that the call was made by Google Assistant, and Google did not inform them ahead of time about the call. So that's what they're saying. Also on that same website, they stated that a business would usually answer the phone by saying its name first. And this is something I missed completely. When they play these calls back, the person who answers the phone will say something like, "Hello, can I help you? Hi, may I help you?" Something along those lines. And as we know, if you're in business, you always want to let people know who they called. The moment you answer the phone, you should be saying, "Hi, this is Mike with Go Cell Phone Repair. How can I help you?" Or you've reached Go Cell Phone Repair, or you've reached Hong's Gourmet Restaurant, or whatever it is. And those statements were missing from these phone calls. So it seemed unusual to them. And I have to agree with this. This would make me a little suspicious. Once again, furthest thing from my mind, because I was so blown away by how impressive this artificial intelligence was. But one, they didn't identify the business. And secondly, they're saying that there really wasn't any background noise during the phone call. So if you contact a business like a restaurant or a hair salon or something in that category where you have customers coming in and out, you've got hair dryers running, you've got you know, carts of dishes coming in or out of the kitchen, you've got people talking to customers. None of that apparently was picked up on the phone calls. Now, they could have called these businesses during off hours. Maybe they weren't really busy at that time, and it would make sense for Google to do something, I guess, like that, so that they could have a clear signal coming from the person who's talking on the phone. To me, that would make sense. If you're going to put your artificial intelligence to the test, you want to make sure that they can hear what people are saying on the other side of the line. But obviously, that aroused some suspicion from skeptics, and you know, we don't really know 100% for sure. They have contacted Google and asked them if the calls were edited, and that is another thing that could have gone into this mix. It's entirely possible that Google made these calls legitimately with the artificial intelligence and said, well, we don't want to name these particular restaurants, you know, whether for whatever reasons. That's something that we see a lot of. You block out the branding, so you're not really giving them free advertising. That's the main reason. If you've ever watched a TV show and you see a logo like any particular brand logo being blurred out from somebody's shirt, that's why they do it, because that company is not paying them for sponsorship, and then the other sponsors get upset if you give them free exposure. So it would make sense that Google might go in and edit out specifically the names of these restaurants so that nobody gets upset about that. So that part I understand. It is unusual that there wasn't any background noise, but the main thing here is this. I don't see how it would make sense for Google to fabricate this whole process, you know, to go in and say, we have an AI that can make these phone calls and make a reservation for you, and it can pass the Turing test, and it fools people on the phone, and have that be a hoax. To me, that wouldn't make sense for Google to do something like that. It wouldn't make sense for Apple or Samsung or any other big brand name to do it. Now, someone else who wasn't as established and maybe had something to gain by pumping stock market value or who knows what, you know, any other sort of motivation, that I could see. But coming from Google, I personally would be more likely to trust that this was the real deal. I guess we will see in the future. But just a couple of things to consider there. I'm going to have to bring my chat over here so I can see what you guys are saying. Or actually, maybe we can do it from here. Let me go back over here and make sure I didn't fall behind too much. Does anybody recall movie Her? I do recall that movie. That was Joaquin Phoenix and a computer, right? I do remember that one. Hey, Piano with Sam, how you doing? A marketing demo that was not real life experience. Say it isn't so. Marketing video's main purpose is to get you to part with your money. I agree completely, Greg, but still in this particular case, knowing nothing else beyond this, I'm going to side with Google. They might have edited the video or the audio. That makes sense for them to delete the business's information. So if it was, hi, go, or what's a good way to, how would you edit that out though? Because if you say hello, I guess you would say, hello, you've reached whatever business this is, how can I help you? And then you just delete out the business name and string that together. That would kind of make sense, right? So Google Duplex is a baloney scam bot. I don't know. I don't think so, Johnny, but again, we'll find out. I think the real Turing test will be when an AI know how to reply like a swearing boss, yeah. And I'll state again, my real Turing test is this. We've seen artificial intelligence be able to have conversations with people. Supposedly you can make reservations. You can talk to Alexa and she can play a song or whatever. That's pretty straightforward, right? But if AI can start writing jokes that are funny, so if AI gets to the point where it has a human-like sense of humor, that would be the point where I'd say we're never going to know if we're talking to a real person or not, because that's something that's intrinsic in humans, but very difficult to define, much less duplicate in code, to the best of my knowledge. Understanding what humor is and how it works and what's funny and what isn't. You can tell a machine to write a joke, but to make that joke funny, excuse me, 1 second. Wow. To make that joke actually funny, I think that would be a more difficult challenge and probably a true test as to whether we're dealing with something that could potentially replace the human thought process, if that makes sense. Remember Google earbuds that were shown in the last year demo where the translation occurred in real time? Yeah, and Greg, I think you made that comment last week and I forgot to go back to it. Well, after they were available, tests for translation showed that it was not that easy or accurate. And I want to say that more recently, I saw something similar to that wasn't earbuds, it was actually built into the phone. But the big difference this time is that rather than being attached to a network and translating language, that these language packets were they were actually installed on the handset. So if you said, okay, I want the Chinese translation packet installed on my phone, you could download that. If you're traveling to France, you could download French or whatever language it is that you wanted, and the phone would be able to translate without being attached to a network. Now I'll have to do some more research and check the sources on that, but that's, to the best of my knowledge, that's the current state of this translation ability, which makes a lot more sense than speaking into a phone, having it connect to a network, going through Google Translate, which we know is, okay, but not the greatest when it comes to translating. Enough to get you by, probably. Why wouldn't they achieve next... why they couldn't achieve, or what they couldn't achieve with classes they try to reenact with earbuds next year will be Google, probably. If you don't mind a really unrelated question, can you just move past if you want. I'm going to my first charging port repair on a 6S. I've been looking at guides and stuff. 1 second. Let me answer Piano Sam's question here real quick. iFixit says difficulty repair. Oh, difficult repair that requires 2 to 3 hours. Sorry, folks, I'm losing my voice already. And requires you to practically tear the phone and remove the logic board. Is this true? Been watching videos and tutorials, and there's nothing like this. So was a bit confused. Hope you don't mind. Question, Piano. I want to say that on the iPhone 6s, off the top of my head, I believe that you do have to remove the logic board because the flex cable for the charge port tucks underneath it. It's a very awkward setup, and it's unfortunate that they did it that way. Is it the iPhone 6s or the 7? Now I'm going to have to look at one. Do I have an iPhone 6s charge port here? I suppose we could take a look real quick here. The big question is this. iPhone 6s 6s charge port. I want to say that the port actually tucks underneath the logic board, doesn't it? That's for the speaker. Okay, I hate that you have to visit a website in order to get an answer anymore. Maybe it's not on the 6S. Maybe it's the 7 that I'm thinking of. Anyone out there want to chime in on this one? Great channel. How do you find the OnePlus 6 prices here in the UK? The base price just increased by 20 pounds. 14 GBP. Give me 1 second. I'm going to get to that. It's actually on my list of topics today. I do want to talk about the OnePlus 6 for sure. If the text speech sounds like a robot. Okay. Take some Ricola throat drops. Yeah, I need to. Piano, or anyone out there remember off the top of their head if the 6S requires removing the logic board for the charge port? I want to say that it does, but I'm going blank on it at the moment, and I don't have a 6S charge port in front of me. But if that is the case, it's not that difficult. It's just, actually it is, because there's a whole bunch of cables and crap plugged into the top end of the logic board. So if it showed in the tutorial that, what? How do we get on that tab? Sorry about that. I'm getting ahead of myself there. If it showed on the tutorial that you have to remove the logic board, then yeah, it's kind of a pain, and it might take someone who hasn't done it a few times a while. I think 2 to 3 hours is ridiculous. You'll probably be looking more like an hour at the most. Ugh. I am ready for this cold to be gone already. I've watched Jerry Rig and tutorials, and they do it quickly without removing the logic board. iFixit says remove the logic board. Man, okay, let's get a definitive answer here. Let's go to the iFixit free repair manual and see 6S charge. I just need to see a picture of it because I can't remember if it's the 6S or the 7 that they put the, oh, come on, that they tuck the cable underneath the logic board. Read the comments on the guide. Yeah, well, I wouldn't pay too much attention. Gosh darn it. You guys can make your site slightly easier for me to navigate. Oh, I guess if I spelled right, if I could spell correctly, that would help too. iPhone 6S charge port. Where's the 6S charge port? Ah, you're killing me. Where is the 6S charge port replacement? All right, let's just do the 6S teardown then. Okay, iPhone 6S. Teardown. Battery replacement. We should be able to tell from battery replacement. I just need a picture of the inside of the phone. So that is wrapped. Gosh darn it. They're not going to pull the board out on this either. And you know, I love iFixit, but man, these tutorials go way, you have to go quite a ways to get an answer here. Can we see this photo? Is that going to help? Yeah, okay, so when it tucks over, I believe those are for the speaker. Oh, man, you got me stumped. I haven't done a 6S charge port for a long time. Okay, so it wraps over the top. No, I don't believe so, Sam. As far as I can tell here, and from the best of my memory, it's at the iPhone 7 that they made it so you have to pull the board out, and then again, not on the 8, I think. And we keep coming back to this stupid tab here, so let's go back here. Second question, and I know I'm going to take way too much time here, so I'm going to just breeze through this quickly, folks. And this is something that I think, you know, whether or not you believe that the Google demo for Duplex was legit or not, the big question is what's going to happen when we get to that point as far as legislation goes and laws that govern how we handle telephone conversations. In California, the Penal Code Section 632 forbids recording any confidential communication, which is defined more or less as any non-public conversation without the consent of all parties, which means if you're on a telephone call, if it's 2 people, 3 people, or more, everyone who's on that call, if it originates in California, has to be aware of the phone call being recorded. A lot of other states share that law. Not everywhere, though. And in fact, some don't even include criminal prosecution if you violate that privacy. And off the top of my head, I want to say that Vermont is one of the few states where you can record a telephone call, not tell anybody about it, and not have to worry about anyone ever suing you for anything, which is whatever, that's how it is. I thought there would be some federal laws that pertain to this, but as far as I can tell, they're not. So that would make me think that for Google to have legitimately made this phone call, it seems like they would have had to tell the people at the restaurant or hair salon or whatever it was that their phone call is being recorded, which brings up another question. What if Google contacted the business prior to these phone calls and was cleared by the owner to record these telephone conversations? If you're at work and your employer says it's okay for someone else to record your phone call while you're on it without your knowledge, does that mean that you are exempt from this law? In other words, do you lose your right to being informed of a phone call being recorded when you're on the clock using your employer's equipment? I don't know the answer to that one, but I suspect that we're going to see a lot of challenges and laws come onto the books and people fighting over this sort of stuff in court because it's just new. It's not something that we're used to seeing, and especially when you bring AI into the equation. And the question is always, when are we going to reach the point when AI has rights? Like we have human rights. Eventually, will there be artificial intelligence rights? There's a lot of strange and interesting things coming up in that area. And they say that there is wiggle room as far as the consent requirement in how the audio is recorded, transmitted, and stored. There are systems that may have to temporarily store a recording of a person's consent of a person's voice without their consent. One of the examples that they give is a voice over IP call that caches audio for a fraction of a second in case of packet loss. So technically, you are having your phone call recorded through a voice over IP system without anyone telling you about it, unless it's in the terms and conditions, I might suspect. But there's also a specific cutout in the law for hearing aids, which apparently do in fact record private conversations without telling the other party about them. Temporary copies produced as part of a legal beneficial service aren't the target of this law, which would make sense. We have a lot of laws that it seems like if you had common sense, you can understand what they're made for, but we see people going to court over these types of laws all the time just to see if they can win. So I'm not sure that really protects someone who is going to have charges filed against them or claims filed against them. Can Google keep a copy of your recorded conversations for research, AI development, and so forth? Good question. I really don't know the answer to that, but I suspect there will be a lot of people asking that one. Maybe Google did get permission from the companies beforehand. If so, is it still okay? Do you have rights at work? If you don't have a right to privacy at work, do you have a right to any of your other, constitutional rights? Which one of those apply when you're at work and which ones don't? I'm not here to give you the answer. I'm just here to plant the seed so that we can have a detailed discussion about this sometime in the future. Let's see. Where do we go? Is that clicking from a butterfly key switch? A click? Oh, you hear clicking here? It's probably me if you're hearing something. What about answering machines without introductions messages? That's a good question, because when you call someone's answering machine and all you hear is a beep and you start talking, I don't know if that would fit. I assume that it wouldn't stand up in court. If someone tried to say, hey, they recorded me and I didn't know I was being recorded, and you called their answering machine and the answering machine beeped, or you didn't hear anybody pick up the phone and you kept talking, I don't suspect that that would stand up in court. But again, what we see a lot of times is people trying to sue someone just because they think they can get away with it. So I think that most judges and most juries would kind of laugh that one off the table, but who knows? One more question. Why are the manufacturers extending the displays on the top part instead of the bottom part of the screen where the thumb and fingers naturally exist? Should be perfect. I agree with you, and I don't know. I'm kind of over this thing about going completely edge to edge, but it's a matter of preference. Obviously, it's something that sells. Let's see. I think that we have... Okay, so you asked about the OnePlus 6, which I wanted to get back to that. That's definitely on the list today. And as you can see, they have a smaller notch at the top than the iPhone 10X, whatever you want to call it. And the OnePlus 6. Now, I was talking about getting away from Apple and getting away from Samsung and finding something else. And for a while, I thought that my first choice might be Motorola. And then yesterday, I discovered that everything that Motorola is selling new now is no longer equipped with wireless charging, and to me that is a deal breaker. And unfortunately, it looks like the OnePlus 6 will not have wireless charging either. So those are two that, you know, at least in my mind, are not going to be likely candidates for me to switch to. However, it is impressive to an extent that the OnePlus 6 has beaten the iPhone X and the Galaxy S9 Plus, which beat the iPhone X more recently. And at the same time, you kind of think that maybe it should be, because for a lot of manufacturers, the whole idea is to make state-of-the-art whatever it is. And I mean, let's see, the iPhone is already, what, 6-7 months old? The iPhone X? I mean, this is so last year, right? Anything that you want to succeed in the market nowadays really should have an advantage over, you know, if it's going to be a flagship phone, top of the line specs, then you really should have an advantage in at least a few areas over your competitors or anybody that you're hoping you can pull some customer base away from. So it's impressive, and still at the same time, it makes a lot of sense that the OnePlus 6 is faster than the iPhone X and the Galaxy S9 Plus. And what they did this time, they had already a few days ago performed a test that showed that they could beat both of those phones with humans basically executing applications from the phone. So they did the same applications on 3 different phones and had a human being pressing the buttons. Well, they decided to take it one step further, and there's a channel on YouTube where a guy has programmed a robot to punch these things in the right order. I assume that this robot is capable of understanding when an application is open and when it's closed, and they can navigate their way around the screen, and confirm that the OnePlus 6 is in fact pretty much the fastest thing we have on the market at the moment. It has 8 gigabytes of RAM compared to the 6 gigabytes on the S9 Plus. Both of them have the Snapdragon 845 processor, and we know that processor is one part of the, you know, what goes into making a phone fast, because you can have 2 phones with the identical processor built in, but if all the other specs don't match up, or if the operating system isn't optimized in a way to take full advantage of that processor, then you're not going to get the same performance from both of those phones. So that's, you know, this is encouraging to see OnePlus stepping up like this. It also has Android 8.1 out of the box compared to 8.0 on the Galaxy S9 Plus. And for 14 GBB, your question was about the price of the OnePlus 6, and I hope that I'm not going to disappoint you here, because I don't know. In fact, I don't think that they mentioned the price on this one, unfortunately. So in order to get that, I would probably check their website. Let's see, are they going to speed test? Are you not going to link to the OnePlus website here and make my life easy? No, you're probably not going to. Check on their website and see if they have any mention, and then I would also, depending on where you're at, it sounds like you're in Europe, I would check on your carrier's website. But if they haven't really rolled it out officially and don't sell it on their website, you might have a hard time getting a complete answer on what that price is going to be exactly. Yeah, why are they extending the top? I don't know. I really don't understand the whole notch thing, to be honest with you. I guess it kind of makes sense if you want to be able to see your battery meter and your signal strength at all times, but beyond that, I don't see a huge advantage for building up towards the top of the phone and then cutting a piece out of the middle of it. It would make a lot more sense to have it down at the bottom, and I wanted to say that there was a Xiaomi, or I think it was a Xiaomi phone that actually had a notch in the bottom with the front-facing camera at the bottom of the screen. But at this point in time, it seems more like everyone is just going to build a notch similar to the iPhone X, unfortunately. So I don't suspect that that's going to change. And let's see, I think we got some pricing here. I'm going to go ahead and open this up. What does it say? 469 pounds and 449s for the 5, right? For the OnePlus 5. So let's see. Because of the natural grip when you hold your phone, it is just out of your pocket with your thumbs pushing the button chin of the device in a cantilever position, which is why you still need a chin. You know, I gotta say, and this, I want to talk about this a little bit also when we get to the red hydrogen, and that is, if I was going to carve out anything, you know, if I was going to put a home button anywhere on my phone along with the fingerprint scanner, I would put it right where my thumb is naturally, which is right here, you know, and everyone's different, but to be honest, I have always felt like the home button was quite awkward unless you're using 2 hands. For your thumb to reach all the way down to the bottom of the screen, personally, not my preference, but it certainly makes a lot more sense than having a button up at the top of the screen. So I don't know. I suppose that I would like to say that manufacturers listen to their customers, but I don't suspect that that is the case. It seems more like any influential brand decides what to make for its customers and then tells them that they need that, and then all of the other smaller companies say, well, we need to make something like this other big company did. That's the impression that I get. It doesn't seem like too many companies, too many phone makers are listening to what their consumers want. If anybody wanted to improve their phone, most of the time they would say, make the battery last longer. What else? What else would really impress you? How many people are saying, I need my phone to be thinner. It's just too thick to hold this thing. I need you to make this phone thinner. We don't hear that too often. And yet we have silly things like a camera that sticks out beyond the back of the screen on a lot of phones these days, which doesn't make sense because you sit your phone down, it doesn't lay flat on the table. And most of the time you end up scratching up your lens over, a course of a few weeks at best. So I'm not sure why they do that. I think it has to do with profit and investments in whatever it is that they decide that they want to put on their phone, and then marketing and saying, hey, you need to buy this now because we think it's best for you. It doesn't always make a lot of sense. Fingerprint scanner on the edge would be the swipe type because of the narrowness. So here's something that let's see. Oh, actually, I've got one more phone to talk about quick, and that is the Nokia X6. Before we get into the red phone, because I'm excited about that one. I won't be buying one probably, but still. The Chinese buy into notched Nokia X6 as it sells out in 10 seconds. Sounds like a concert ticket somewhere or something, right? So what happened? Well, first of all, this phone starts at the equivalent of $205. It has dual rear cameras. One is 16 megapixels, one is 5 megapixels. It has a 5.8 inch screen with a notch that is much smaller than the iPhone Xs and accommodates a 16 megapixel front facing camera with f2.0 aperture, 19.9 FHD plus panel, octa-core Snapdragon 636 processor, up to 6 gigs of RAM, and a quick charge capable 3060 milliamp hour battery. Now, for the 6 gigabytes of RAM, it will not be the same price point. They start out at $205 and go up from there. Obviously, this is the base model we're talking about. It does have Android 8.1 out of the box with the P update coming sooner than most flagships. I don't have a definite date on that, but they're saying it's going to be much sooner than a lot of the other companies do. But here's the bad news. It most likely will be a while before this phone is sold anywhere other than in China, and probably in the US, never. That's becoming the trend with Chinese companies, unfortunately. Now, as far as this phone goes, if you know the story already, Nokia sold to, basically Google sold to China. Was it AMD at the time, or HMD, sorry, HMD Global, after they acquired Nokia long enough to take all of the patented technology that they wanted, and then they flipped it and sold it back to this Chinese company, and they have been in manufacturing since then, and not doing as much exciting stuff within the phone world for a while. However, they did make a whole lot of money back in 2017. It says that they generated raw revenue in excess of $140 million in the time it takes to tie your shoe. Oh, no, sorry, this is about the sale. So back in 2017, though, they did raise a lot of capital, and it says that they have sold this phone in 10 seconds, 700,000 units, and generated $140 million worth of revenue in that amount of time. So that's impressive. Cool to see Nokia doing something. Unfortunate that we probably won't see a whole lot of it here in the US, but I hope that they make a big comeback. Finished phone is more nightmarish when it's time to service them. Good point, Johnny. When you look at like Microsoft's Surface Pro tablet, computer, whatever you want to call it, that's a good example of why just making things thinner and thinner and thinner means that eventually you won't be able to repair them, or it's going to be, it's practically a disposable piece of equipment, and that is unfortunate. If we can't fix it, and even the company that makes it, if they do fix it, they're going to have to refurbish the whole thing. I mean, you'd have to tear off every one of those self-destructing panels in order to get to the inside, and then be able to reattach them with whatever hot glue it is that they put into them. it's very unfortunate and sad, and then, you know, more than likely going to be something that, if the price point is low enough, just ends up going into a landfill anyways. So hopefully we can convince, you know, one way or another, especially if we get this right to repair legislation to pass, at least in one state, you know, eventually maybe we'll reach the point where manufacturers continue to be, you know, are obligated to make, sorry, too much coffee once again, are obligated to design equipment that can be serviced, which makes a lot of sense in this day and age. Although they would much rather have you throw it in the trash and buy a new one, I'm sure. X6 sounds like Brexit or exit. That's funny. Thinner phones also mean stress points become more critical in creating flaws due to stress points. Good point, Greg. Another one there. Yeah, and you know, the temptation to do something silly with your phone, like stick it in your back pocket and sit on it, the thinner it is, the more likely you are to forget it's even there, right? If you have a super fat wallet, it makes it very uncomfortable to sit down on it. So a lot of times you pull that out of your phone, or if you have a big, you know, iPhone 8 Plus in your back pocket, most of us aren't going to sit down on that. As soon as I get into the car, I pull my phone out of my pocket before I take a seat. But if you have a super thin phone, you might forget that thing's there. And yeah, you sit down once and snap it in half, and you're done. Finally, if you were waiting, and I haven't heard anyone really just complaining and saying, I can't wait for my Moto Z to get an upgrade, but if you were waiting for it, Android 8.0 Oreo is officially rolling out in the US unlocked Moto Z. Should you be excited about that? I suppose if you have a Moto Z, you should be. And my question is always this: what specifically are most people looking forward to when a new when a new Android operating system is released? And in the case of the Android 8.0 Oreo, it brings important user experience altering. That's quite a claim to make there. User experience altering stuff like background limits. I don't know what that means. What do they mean by background limits? Improved boot times. That's a plus for anyone who actually reboots their phone. And this is a funny one to me. I don't know too many people that seriously power down their phone to the point where it's completely turned off. So when you talk about improved boot times, if you were looking at one of those stupid things like the optimizing applications that some Android phones have a tendency to do, that would be a huge plus. That was the one that made me go nuts and pretty much want to not use my Galaxy S6 anymore, because every time, or no, I'm sorry, not the Galaxy X6. This was when I had the HTC Vivid. You turn that thing on, and it was 15 minutes before you could use your phone. It was insane. It was optimizing 100 some applications, and I've heard that the remedy for that is to delete a whole bunch of applications. Well, if you have a phone with applications on it and you can't use the apps, then really what's the point, right? So improve the boot time, autofill functionality, smart text selection, picture-in-picture mode. I guess that's important. Notification dots and Android instant apps to the table, not to mention a fully redesigned emoji set. We know how important that is. Plus various Lenovo-made stability improvements. So if your Moto Z was not acting very stable, supposedly Android 8.0 Oreo will fix that and offer you many other user experience altering stuff. So there you have it. That should be out very soon. In fact, I want to say that as we speak, this is currently available. If you have a Moto Z that is unlocked in the US, you can go ahead and upgrade it now. The red hydrogen, this phone, even though I will almost never own one, if they sent me a demo, I would be happy to test this out and do a full review. This is a really cool looking phone for people who are in the photography industry. For most of us, probably not something that we're going to see the mainstream public get excited about and or justify purchasing. But if you are a photographer, you already know about Red. They make impressive video camera equipment, and they are now going to sell an Android phone with a 5.7-inch display that has a big set of pogo pins on the back to connect it to Red's other cameras, and also allow users to attach forthcoming modules to it, including lens mounts. The first module is expected to be a huge camera sensor, like DLR size huge, and should support brands like Fuji, Canon, Nikon, and Leica. Who else is there, really? Actually, they left out Sony, right? I didn't see Sony on the list. Bigger than the iPhone 8 Plus, a Snapdragon 835, 4-view, which turns the 2560 by 1440 screen into a holographic display, but unfortunately, the images cannot easily be photographed. This is something that you have to see in person, unfortunately, which, you know, again, I don't know where you're going to go to see a demo of this particular handset, but it would be cool to check out. They make it sound like the holograms that you saw in the first Star Wars movie will literally pop out of the screen of your phone, and it has a special camera built into it so that if you have a FaceTime-like conversation with someone else, you can both see each other as a 3D hologram, which sounds like a cool gimmick. I'm not sure how practical that part of the camera or the phone is going to be. I think it's more about selling a phone that attaches to camera lenses for photography. Obviously not blowing anyone away with the specs necessarily, but the design looks really cool on this thing. So they've got fins on the side, or they call them scallops. If you take a look at this thing, that fit your hand when you grip it, and I think that is something that, you know, ergonomically speaking, this would be a very comfortable phone to hold on to, and with any luck, maybe other manufacturers will take a look at this design and say, hey, we think that's a good idea. We're going to include that in some of our phones in the future. My favorite of all of the features that are on this phone is that they have included, let me see if I can pull up, where's the thing at here? Let me just search for it. Oops, what happened? Let's try it again. Okay, where'd it go? So these guys took my idea, and again, you guys got to vouch for me. I've been talking about this forever. The power button on the right is where the fingerprint scanner is located. So you pick up your phone, and your fingerprint scanner is right there, where your finger is. Not on the back, so you have to kind of search around and look for it. Not down here in the home button, so you have to do one of these. No, you pick up your phone, and your fingerprint is directly on the fingerprint scanner. So if that is a feature that you like in your phone, to me, this makes more sense than anything as far as fingerprint scanners go. It's where your finger is. Like, I don't understand why no one else has done that already. Now, unfortunately, this thing is going to start at $1,195, so $1,200 for the aluminum finish, and if you want the titanium model, it's $1,595, so $1,600 on this phone, more than the iPhone 10, probably more than any iPhone that's going to be released this year, or any other high-end phone. So that obviously is going to limit not only the crowd, but, you know, who people having the money available to buy this thing, and obviously being an Android, it's only going to be a year before it's outdated. It's not really starting off with top-of-the-line specs, but it looks like the things that they're really relying on selling this phone are going to be the ability to attach camera lenses and this hologram thing, which I think is cool, but I'm not sure that's really going to blow anyone. Excuse me. Going to blow anyone away? We shall see. And I think I might even finish ahead of time today. You know, I did have one question about this, so going back to the red hydrogen phone. What do you all think about Face ID? And the reason I ask this is because I don't have much of an opinion on the topic. Personally, I'm okay with the passcode. I don't feel the necessity of using a fingerprint scanner. If I were going to use a fingerprint scanner, I would certainly want it to be located where my finger is naturally on the phone. But beyond that, I think that it's something that I don't personally, at least at this point in time, need on my phone. I certainly don't want Face ID, and I don't want to put my Face ID into my phone. I don't know why. It just seems awkward to me. I mean, look, I'm putting my face all over YouTube, okay? But having a thing in my phone that scans people's faces, to me that seems like a waste of money. So when I look at a device that I want to purchase, whether it's a phone or a car or a microscope or anything else out there, it could be a Blu-ray player. If I look at a device or a TV and it has a bunch of features built into it that require hardware, I'm not talking about software upgrades, but I'm talking about hardware. If I look at something that has a lot of hardware built into it that I don't need, then I assume that I'm paying for something that doesn't make any sense to me. So if I bought an iPhone 10 with the Face ID system built into it, I'm paying for that Face ID system with no intention of using it. To me, that is wasting money. So my preference is to go with something that fits my needs as a consumer. I want to pay for equipment that's at least, 90% stuff that I'm going to use. I don't want to pay for a lot of extra stuff that's just going to sit there and not do anything. Secondly, or thirdly, holding a phone out in front of your face to unlock it, to me, doesn't make a lot of sense, and I'm only trying to put my mind, go get into the headspace of people who actually use Face ID. Does it make sense to you that you have to pick up the phone this way? And the big breakthrough recently with one of the, I don't know if it's iOS 11 or an upcoming iOS version, they have fixed Face ID so that now you can hold your phone in landscape mode and it will unlock, just like if you're holding it upright this way. Now, when I read the article, I thought what it meant, it said horizontally. Sorry guys, I'm gonna have to get off here in just a second. When they said that your phone would read your Face ID, you could use Face ID with the phone horizontally, I thought that meant when the phone was like sitting down on a table flat. To me, that would be impressive. I don't have to have my phone out in front of my face, but what they were saying is that you can turn your phone sideways and now you have Face ID. Well, big whoop. I mean, to me, that doesn't excite me in the least. If I were to imagine myself as a person who used Face ID. Doesn't matter. Am I way behind on the comments? Have I lost anyone? Okay, no opinions on that one, guys. I mean, I'll let it go if not, but this is just my take on it. The two most important things when it comes to fingerprint scanners, Face ID, and hardware in general, to me, are that they should be easy to use, and I certainly shouldn't be considering putting money into a product that includes a lot of hardware that I don't need. I don't want to buy stuff that I don't need. So that is just my humble opinion as a consumer and a technician. All right, so cell phones thrown into the trash or exploding in garbage dumps, garbage trucks and dumps. That's really messed up. We've heard for a long time, or we've known for a long time, that lithium-ion batteries can become unstable for a number of reasons. Sometimes they are defective from the factory. Sometimes they, get too hot. Sometimes people stab them with the screwdriver. So there are a number of things that can go wrong. But it's such a serious problem that you cannot ship a lithium battery by air within the United States. The post office and other carriers, and I don't know if it's federal law or not, but they pretty much have said that if the phone is not contained inside of a phone, you can't ship it at all. So obviously throwing these things in the trash, which is something that we have a habit of doing in the US, people get done with things, they throw them in the trash can. And obviously there's been a lot of awareness more recently in the last decade or so where people are saying, hey, we shouldn't be throwing away toxic chemicals or things that contain lithium or mercury or all sorts of other toxins that eventually make their way into the groundwater supply. But more importantly, this is something that could really endanger the person that's handling it. And obviously, if you're handling refuse, you expect to come across all sorts of weird stuff. I'm sure these guys are wearing gloves and hopefully eye protection and everything else, but that's for the more common stuff. When you talk about something that can catch on fire or explode, that's something that's a lot more difficult to defend yourself against, to prepare for. So it's unfortunate that people just take a phone and throw it in the trash can. At least take it to a recycling center. In many cases, you can get some money for it if you sell it, even in non-working condition. I can't play this video, unfortunately, but I will include a link to it. It's called Fire Ignites at Eco Main Facility, and they show a heap of trash that just you would think spontaneously combusts because there was an unstable lithium-ion battery from a cell phone sitting in that pile of trash. I don't have to say how bad this could be for someone that works there or anyone in the surrounding area if the thing got out of control. So hopefully that's something we don't see happening too much more. Here in New York City, it is illegal to dump electronics and computers into household refuse since 2 years ago. And Johnny, I'm pretty sure in California we have similar laws. The only question is, how often do people just not pay attention to that? Or if they walk by a dumpster somewhere, we used to worry about people throwing their oil away. Back in the day when you changed the oil on your car yourself, a lot of people would not take that oil to a recycling center. They would dig a hole in their backyard and pour the oil, put it in the ground. And you can only imagine it's just a matter of time before that stuff leaks into the groundwater supply and your kids or your grandkids or whoever else, maybe you, is going to be drinking toxins. So Pretty messed up, but it's difficult to get this information out to everyone. There are a lot of people who don't watch YouTube. You know, they don't read the same news that we do, and they don't really know how this stuff works. And they think if you're done with something, you chuck it in the trash. And you know, particularly dangerous here, where someone could end up starting a fire with lithium-ion battery. I hope that you'll share this and let anyone you know, hey, don't throw your. And this is what I tell customers when they're in the store. Even if they're selling a phone, a lot of times they'll come in and say, hey, how much will you give me for this phone? And we make them an offer, and they say, you know, okay, well, I was just going to throw it away, but, you know, can I get anything for it? And a lot of times, if it's a really old phone, I'll say, look, I can't buy your Motorola flip phone from you. You know, there's no way I can sell it. There's no way that anyone's going to want this. There are no usable parts because that phone's so old. But even if if you like, I can recycle it for you. We'll send it to a facility where it can be disposed of properly. But whatever you do, even if you don't leave it here, just don't throw it in the trash can. I tell people that all the time. And a lot of them really aren't aware. They don't know that that's not an option. Like, you shouldn't be doing that. Okay, I think we had a question here about a phone. Darren Lawrence, how you doing? Hi guys, change screen on iPhone 6 and home button now doesn't work. Fingerprint scanner does work though. Many people in the same situation. Is there a fix? iPhone 6 home button? There probably is, Darren, but you know, the big thing is you want to keep your original home button, because if not, you won't have Touch ID anymore. Now on the iPhone 6, you should be able to replace the entire button if you want to, but you'll lose your Touch ID. So if you've got Touch ID, then my suspicion would be that either the connector is not attached properly, there could be a component somewhere in that area, or where the long flex cable attaches to on the logic board. So if you have a microscope, or at least like a magnifying glass, take a close look at everything that plugs into the, you know, from the fingerprint or from the button itself all the way up to the top edge of the logic board where it plugs in here. Check those connections and cables. And in some cases, you can actually damage the cable, or you can buy a screen that has, if you buy the completely assembled screens that have defective cables in them, hopefully that's where your problem is. If it's in the flex cable of the home button itself, that's going to be a lot trickier to fix. But I am, later this week, hopefully going to be checking out this tool that's supposed to allow us to repair iPhone 7 home buttons when they have damaged the flex cable. I don't know if it's going to work on the iPhone 6 also, but possibly, so I'd have to get back to you on that. But take a good look at the connections and the cables, because if you have Touch ID, I would be suspicious about maybe having a slightly bent flex cable. You know, when you push those pop connectors in, a lot of times the weight of your finger will be right on the center, so they'll just kind of bow up a little bit at the edges, and you might have something on one edge or the other that isn't quite pushed in. So if you want to detach everything, take a close look at it, make sure everything's nice and straight, and then do your best to put even pressure on there when you push it in. But outside of that, I don't know of any common issues with the home button not working on the iPhone 6. We did have a problem with the iPhone 7 for a while because people were being a little rough with them, and they're a lot more delicate than any previous generation was, but not so much on the iPhone 6. So close inspection, and if that doesn't do the trick, take a look at a screen repair video somewhere on my channel, or this video, and put a comment down there in the bottom, and I'll try to help you figure it out if possible. $500 fine if it's in front of your house, or $2,000 if they catch somebody doing it in a litter bin. Good, and hopefully that money goes to help clean up the environments on some level. All right, last thing here, there is a 10-kilogram dumbbell iPhone case. I don't know why, and I don't generally talk about these articles that have accessories. You know, it's basically an advertisement for an accessory, but this was one of the silliest things I've ever seen in my life, and if they wanted to send me one, I'd be happy to review it just because it's funny. But this makes no sense. Why would you... Okay, you're going to pick up a 10... I don't know what 10 kilos converts to, but Japanese telecom giant SoftBank is selling this contraption for $100. So if you want to have a case that makes you pump iron every time you use your phone, well, there it is. Yes, it's probably much less likely that someone's going to steal your phone. I can't imagine this being practical on any level. I think this is just kind of like, hey, look what we did to get some exposure. But this is one of the most ridiculous things I've ever seen in my life, and I don't expect many people will be buying it, especially for $100. But there it is. The silliest iPhone case you are likely to see. And I finished with a minute to spare. I know I've been keeping you guys here late the last few times. I really thought this was only going to go a half hour today because, man, I can hardly talk this morning, but I'm recovering. So that just about wraps it up for today, everyone. Thank you again so much for watching. Please, if you haven't already, hit that like button. You don't have to subscribe, but if you want to get notifications about this, hit the subscribe button and the bell notification icon, or follow me on Twitter, because Twitter makes life so easy. As soon as I start a stream or publish a video, it tweets out on Twitter automatically. That's at @FixMyCellPhone. Otherwise, if you hit subscribe and the notification bell, blah, 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 that'll do it. But most of all, hit the like button if you like the video. If you didn't, okay, sorry. I'll try harder next time. But if you hit the like, it'll help me out a lot. Instead of a home button, replace it with a Foster button. There you go. All right, friends, I'm going to take off. We have some very cool guests coming up in the next few weeks. I'm going to announce those this Thursday, and we'll be back on for the Thursday night phone tech hangout, 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And I think that's it. So that is a hefty anti-theft bumper indeed. Until then, you guys have a great week. I will talk to you next time I see you. I'm out.